Welcome, my friends, to the vault. I'm a female, and the story I'm about to share with you happened almost 10 years ago. At the time, I was 17 years old, and like most teenagers my age, I was content to lock myself away in my room with my laptop and headphones. In autumn of that year, my parents went up north for the weekend. We live in Michigan, and the Upper Peninsula is famous for its scenery that time of year. I was left with the house to myself for the entirety of the weekend and thought nothing of it. I enjoyed my privacy and didn't mind being alone. Let me tell you about my house and where we lived. Our house is very old and a modest dwelling, 2 floors and a basement. All the bedrooms are on the first floor, since the second floor is an unfinished attic. The house itself is about 8 miles from the nearest town. The backyard is pretty large, with an even larger cornfield stretching out for acres and acres, separating the property from the lake on the other side of the trees. The cornfield stretches partially around the house, creating a wall between our house and the neighbors to the east. It wasn't isolated by any means. There are 5 houses very near, 1 on each side and 3 across the street. A local hunter, a farmer, a retired couple, a construction worker, and the local preacher were the people I called neighbors. It's a quiet road, little traffic, and only the occasional coyote howl to disrupt the night. A nice, calm place to live. It was day 2 of my weekend alone. It was a chilly evening, so I shut my window and locked it before I huddled up on my bed with my laptop. I've always been a big fan of urban legends, especially legends that have some truth woven into the tale. Truth always makes a good story better, and makes a scary story all the more frightening. That night, I had no idea that I was about to take part in my own scary tale. While zoning out on my laptop, watching horror videos, and reading stories online, I heard an odd noise over my headphones. I pulled one speaker away from my ear and focused on the sound. The sound was coming from my window. My bedroom is a corner bedroom, and as a result I have 2 windows. One window facing my neighbor to the west, and the second window faced my backyard. It was the second window that had the strange noise. At first, I thought leaves and loose branches were getting blown against the screen, since it was fall and the weather in Michigan can get pretty harsh and unpredictable. But my reasoning didn't quite fit with the sound. It wasn't a banging or rattling. It was like metal wires snapping. I removed my headphones and used my laptop screen as a light to see where I was walking, without putting a glare on the window's glass. The curtains and blinds beneath were drawn, preventing anything outside from being able to see inside. I was nervous about looking outside. I was alone, and I had no idea what was going on. I hugged my wall as I slipped my fingers under the curtains and slowly, carefully, pulled down one of the blinds so I could look outside. There, standing in the darkness outside my window, was a person holding a knife, cutting at my screen. My heart skipped a beat as my blood ran cold. My instincts told me not to make a sound and stay out of sight. I slid down my wall and crawled on my hands and knees to my cell, sitting on the small table next to my bed. I called 911 and whispered everything to the person on the other line. I told them someone was outside my window and he had a knife and that I was alone. The operator stayed on the line with me and kept reassuring me that the police were on their way. I could hear my screen being cut open. I kept telling her I wanted to run, but she insisted I stayed put and didn't make a sound. Suddenly, the snapping sound of the screen wires being cut stopped. I listened and almost screamed in fear when I heard a new sound. The knife was digging at the wooden frame of the window as the man tried to pry it open from the outside. The motion light in the backyard suddenly flashed on, just seconds before the red and blue lights of the arriving police car shone through my other window. I listened carefully and heard someone running from the car to the backyard. I could also hear their radio clicking on and off as they checked the area. A loud knock at the front door made me jump. I heard a man call out for me, identifying himself as a cop. Still scared, I opened my bedroom door and crept down the hall. I peeked into the living room and didn't see anything. The knocking persisted, and again the cop identified himself. I peeked through the window and the front door and saw him standing there, his eyes still checking the yard. I flung open the door and almost pulled the cop inside my house, just so happy to see someone else. He asked me if I was okay, and if I could give him a description of the man I saw. I couldn't. He was wearing all black and had a hood pulled up which shrouded his face. All I could do was describe the large hunting knife he used to cut my screen. His partner joined him on the front porch and told us that he didn't see anyone in the area. I kept insisting on what I saw, and they of course believed me since the patrolling cops saw the damage on the screen. The cops did a second sweep of the property and made sure every single window was secured and that the doors were locked and the garage was secure. Before leaving, the cops told me they keep a patrol car in the area, but they were confident that whoever I saw wouldn't be back. They just figured that it was some teenager who was trying to break in through my window and got scared when he saw the police car arrive. I thanked them and proceeded to double check the locks for myself. I wanted to call my mom, but I knew my parents were already on their way home and would be back by morning. Unable to go back into my room, I chose to sleep on the couch in the living room and tell my parents as soon as they walked in the front door. About an hour later, after I was finally able to relax and started to drift off to sleep on the couch, I heard a loud bang against my back door. I sat up and looked through the kitchen into the back mudroom that leads to the back door. This time I knew I was in danger. I grabbed my cell and dialed 911 again. This time, I ran into the kitchen and grabbed a large knife from the butcher's block and huddled on the floor against the counter and cabinets. I pressed the phone to my ear as the operator, a man this time, continued to talk to me so I didn't feel alone. I gripped the knife tighter and began mentally trying to psych myself up. If this man managed to get inside, would I be able to defend myself? He had a knife. Maybe that's why I grabbed one too. But I didn't know anything about him. How tall was he? How strong was he? Did I even stand a chance? I heard the wood on the door frame crack. The old door was locked by a chain. One more hard kick could surely break the door down. And then, I didn't want to think about it. I prepared for the final bang, for the door to give in and for that man to attack me when I heard a voice yelling over the banging noise. "Get on the ground! Drop the knife!" "Oh, thank God," I said out loud. "The cops are here." The operator on the line, who had been speaking to me throughout the entire ordeal, continued to try to keep me calm. I listened to the cop order the man to drop the knife over and over again, but I just knew that the crazy bastard wasn't listening. Then, Another bang, but it wasn't from someone kicking in the back door. It was from someone firing a gun. It was silent, and time seemed to stand still. A gentle knock at the front door drew my attention. The same cop as before was once again identifying himself at the front door. I told the operator a cop was at the door and hung up. I opened the front door, the knife still in my hand. The cop saw it and very calmly suggested I put it down. My hand was gripping the knife so tightly that my knuckles were white and my fingers were cramped. When I dropped the knife, the cop escorted me from the front door into his car, which was parked in the side yard. Under the motion lights of the backyard, I could see his partner standing over the body of the man in black. I could see his knife lying on the ground just inches from his hand, and even from that distance, I knew there was blood on the blade. The man himself looked like he had been dead for weeks. His hood had fallen from his face, revealing it to the night. He was white and impossibly pale. His skin was unnaturally aged with heavy wrinkles and lots of discoloration. His hair was long, stringy, and blonde. His eyes, still open, were sunken into his skull. I was taken to the police station to deliver a statement and to ensure that there were no other attackers on my property. When I told them everything I knew to the interviewing cop, another cop walked into the room with a file in his hands. He whispered something to the first cop and handed him the file. I asked the cop if they knew who the man was, and he nodded. I asked to know who he was and what he wanted. At first, the cop didn't want to tell me, but I needed to know. I managed to coax the cop into telling me, and a part of me wishes I let it go. The man was a chronic junkie who abused any and all drugs he could get his hands on. He used to live in the area until he was finally locked up in a mental hospital about 20 years prior. The act that got him locked away all those years ago was a result of his attempt to burn down a local church, declaring that he was the true Son of God, and that all religious figures, priests, ministers, etc., were false prophets and tools of Satan. The cops figured that he was trying to break into my house because he thought it was where the preacher lived. He had the wrong house and would have killed me anyway if he had gotten inside. After a moment of letting this sink in, I asked why the cops didn't see him the first time I called. His answer sent shivers up my spine, and now I never look at my backyard the same. He told me that the man had hidden in the cornfield the first time and was watching the house from between the rows. He had never left. He was always there watching the house, waiting for the police to leave. He truly was crazy, and I'm glad he won't be around anymore. First off, a description. I am a 27, going to turn 28 in a month, female from southern Wisconsin. A little less than 6 years ago, starting late 2010, I had completed and received my high school equivalency diploma, and not even a month later, I attended the community college I had received said diploma from. I didn't then, and still don't, have my license. So my mom's boyfriend would take me to school in the mornings on his way to work, and another family member would pick me up and take me home. Sometimes I had just daytime classes. Sometimes I had just evening and night classes. Sometimes both. On this particular day, I had an evening class on a Friday, and got out just as the campus was closing. My cousin offered to pick me up this evening, but she was taking a while, which didn't bother me. She worked long hours, and on top of it had a toddler to also take care of, so I understood. But then, things turned creepy. As the sun was setting, I remember waiting by the front doors for my cousin to arrive. There is a small walkway about 15 feet long, about 4 feet wide. I was waiting at the end of the walkway, not even a step between there and the parking lot, when a man who I'd previously seen as the campus janitor came through the double doors. I don't remember exactly what he looked like, other than he was an older man, thin and average height with gray hair, but that's all I remember. I think he might have been wearing some kind of baseball cap too. Again, the smaller deets are fuzzy. Anyway, he started up small talk, which I didn't mind. It was nice to have someone to talk to while I waited for my cousin. On top of it, he kept his distance, which I appreciated, since I'm really shy and timid. I must admit, though, that unlike a lot of girls who post these kinds of stories, I'm not attractive at all. Average at best. More so then than I am now, with an average face. However, as minutes passed, he slowly inched closer to me, and his questions became more personal and invasive. I don't remember them all, but I do remember things like where I lived, if I had a boyfriend, where my cousin was coming from, and when she was supposed to pick me up. My own answers became short and to the point. This was my polite and small way of showing this guy that he was making me uncomfortable and that I wanted to be left alone now, but I didn't have it in me to be blunt or impolite. Anyway, after a few more minutes passed, he disappeared back into the campus. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the encounter was over, and hoping more than ever to see my cousin's truck. All was good, until about 10 minutes later, when a blood-red truck showed up. Thinking this was my cousin, who has a similar-looking truck, I took a few steps forward, but stopped suddenly when I saw who was sitting in the driver's side through the window. You guessed it. He pulled down the passenger side window, and I remember him making a small joke about me getting into his truck with him. A few more things were said from his end, but then something came out of his mouth that really pissed me off, but scared the shit out of me instead. "Well, I guess your cousin's not coming after all," or something along those lines. I knew what he was insinuating, but I would never have gotten into that truck with him. I didn't care if I had to camp out on campus. It wasn't going to happen. What scared me, though, was the thought of this encounter turning really ugly and being forced into this creep's truck. Luckily for me, 2 teenagers had just shown up and were making their way through the campus parking lot. They seemed to be just on a small evening stroll through the country where the campus was located at. Hell, most of Wisconsin is country. I saw the janitor tense up and yell, "Oh, I'll be right back," and sped off. Before I knew it, he was gone. This fact solidified in my mind that he was up to no good, that something creepy was dancing through his mind, that his intentions regarding me and the fact that we were seemingly alone were not innocent or helpful. About 10 or 15 minutes later, my cousin finally showed up, and I had a nice peaceful ride back home. I didn't dare tell her or my mom, who I was still living with while I went to school, because I was afraid my mom would make going to college more complicated for me. And I have to say that aside from this encounter, I loved college. I still miss it. I actually miss doing homework. Sleepless nights, writing papers, and reading textbooks. I wish I could afford to go back, honestly. Anyway, I ended up graduating with an associate's degree in business management, spring of 2012, and it felt like such a great accomplishment for me. I also never had any more encounters with the janitor. He never even talked to me again, thankfully. I would still tense up every now and then when I'd see him, especially just after the encounter. With all that said, thank you to the teenagers who were on an evening stroll through the country. You possibly saved me from being raped or even murdered and left in a ditch somewhere in the country. To the creepy janitor that I'm sure had no innocent intentions towards me, I haven't seen you since 2012, and I hope it stays that way. What's up, guys? Ghastly Ghoul here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, it'd be great if you would click that thumbs up button, comment, and share with your friends. Please consider joining the Ghastly Gang by hitting that subscribe button. If you would like for me to narrate your scary story, please send it to my email address below, or post it on the free horror stories subreddit. Please follow me on Twitter and like me on Facebook, so you can keep up to date with what's happening with the channel. The links are below. And now, we must part ways, my friends. I fear you are living on borrowed time, for you'll never truly escape from the vault.